Hello students, Jinalisha welcomes you all on behalf of Saraswat International Academy. Today we will begin with the next part of the chapter Reproduction in Organisms. Students, in the previous two videos we have studied what reproduction is. We have studied that the process of reproduction can be broadly classified into two categories. One is asexual reproduction, which involves only one parent, and another one is the sexual reproduction, which involves two parents of opposite sex. We have also studied regarding the asexual reproduction in detail, its types, right? Now students, in today's lecture we will be studying in detail regarding the process of sexual reproduction. So students, we know that sexual reproduction is a process which involves the two parents, okay? There is the involvement of the two parents of opposite sex. There will be the formation of the gamete as well as there will be the fusion of the gamete in the process of sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction involves the formation of the gametes, that is the male and female gametes, their fusion, that is fertilization, resulting into the formation of the zygote. As it involves the fusion of the male and female gametes, the offsprings which are produced as a result of sexual reproduction are not genetically identical. Why? Because they are produced through the process of the fusion of the gametes. Sexual reproduction involves formation of male and female gametes either by the same individual or by the different individuals of the opposite sex. So what processes are included or what is involved in sexual reproduction? Formation of male and female gametes, that is the main thing. Now who will form that? That male and female gametes may be formed by the same individual, that is single individual will form both male and female gametes, or it may be formed by the different individuals. If different individuals are involved, then they will be of course of the opposite sex, that is male parent will produce the male gamete, female parent will produce the female gamete. These gametes fuse to form zygote, which develops to form the new organism. So after the formation of the gametes, there will be the fusion of the gametes, that is fertilization. Due to fertilization, zygote will be formed and this zygote forms the new organisms. Sexual reproduction is an elaborate, that is it is a detailed complex, it is a very long process. Complex process and slow process as compared to asexual reproduction. In comparison to asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction is a very long process, that is it is an elaborate process. It is a complex process as well as a very slow process. Because of the fusion of male and female gametes, asexual reproduction results in the offsprings that are not identical to parents or amongst themselves. So, as the offsprings are produced due to the fusion of the gamete, these offsprings are not identical to their parents as well as they are not identical amongst themselves too. A study of diverse organisms, that is plants, animals or fungi, show that though they differ so greatly in external morphology, the internal structure and physiology when it comes to sexual mode of reproduction, surprisingly they share a similar pattern. Now those organisms which show the sexual reproduction, whether it is plant, whether it is animal, whether it is fungi, all these groups of organisms show sexual reproduction. Now we know that all these organisms, they vary very much in their external morphology, their external structure, their external features, they are totally different from each other. So they differ greatly in external morphology. But when it comes to the internal structure and when we talk about the sexual mode of reproduction, then the method of the sexual reproduction they carry out is almost similar. So though they differ in morphology, but they differ in morphology, their internal structures are also different. The internal structure of fungi is different from plants, plants is different from animals, as well as their physiology are also different. The morphology, the anatomy, that is internal structure, as well as the physiology of all these organisms are different. But when it comes to the sexual mode of reproduction, the method they follow is similar, though they are different in morphology, anatomy and physiology. But when it comes to the sexual mode of reproduction, they share the similar pattern of sexual reproduction. Now, we are talking about sexual reproduction. So, those organisms which reproduce sexually, they pass through certain phases of life. So, which are the different phases in the life of the sexually reproducing organism? So, basically there are 3 phases in the life of the sexually reproducing organism. The first phase is called juvenile phase. The second phase is called reproductive phase, and the third phase is called as the senescent phase. So, how many phases in the life of sexually reproducing organism? 3. Juvenile, reproductive and senescent phase. So, first of all, let us study regarding the juvenile phase. So, what is juvenile phase? The phase from the birth till the organisms attain the sexual maturity. Which phase? The phase from birth till the organisms attain the sexual maturity. It means phase from birth till the organisms are capable of reproducing. That phase is called as what? It is called as the juvenile phase. So, basically the growth period is called as a juvenile phase. All organisms have to reach a certain age of growth and maturity in their life before they can reproduce sexually. So, before the sexual phase or before the organisms become capable of reproduction, they pass through the stages of growth and maturity. That phases of growth and maturity is called as a juvenile phase. So, that period of growth is called juvenile phase. That is, we can say, period of the growth between birth up to the reproductive maturity. From birth to the reproductive maturity, that phase is called as the juvenile phase. It is known as the vegetative phase in plants. In animals, it is called juvenile phase. In plants, that juvenile phase, that period of growth and maturity is called as vegetative phase. So, we can consider it as a period of growth between seed germination up to the initiation of flowering. Seed germination से लेके till the plants start producing the flower, that period is called as the vegetative phase. This phase is of variable durations in different organisms. The juvenile phase varies for different kinds of the organisms. In human beings, it is said that juvenile phase lasts up to 12 to 13 years of age. Now, next one is the reproductive phase. The second phase is the reproductive phase. The name itself indicates that phase during which the person is capable of reproducing. The person becomes capable of reproducing, that is, the person is reproductively mature. That phase is called as the reproductive phase. The end of the juvenile or vegetative phase, which marks the beginning of the reproductive phase, can be easily seen in higher plants when they come to flower. So, basically, the end of the juvenile phase marks the beginning of the reproductive phase. And ये जो transition हो रहा है from the juvenile phase to the reproductive phase, it can be clearly seen in the higher plants. How can we say that? Because the higher plants during their reproductive phase come into flowering. So once the plant starts the flowering process, we can say that the plants are now in the reproductive phase. During this phase, the reproductive system is mature enough to produce male and female gametes. The organism is ready to mate and reproduce. So, what happens during the reproductive phase? During this phase, the organisms becomes mature reproductively. That is, the reproductive system of the organisms becomes mature. As it becomes mature, it starts producing male and female gametes. This gametes formation takes place. The organisms, they mate and finally they reproduce. Some major hormonal changes are exhibited during this phase. During this phase, that is during the reproductive phase, hormonal changes are observed within the organisms. In some plants where flowering occurs more than once, what would you call the interflowering period, the juvenile or mature? So, question arises, those plants which flowers for more than one time, what can we call as a period between the two flowering? So, whether it should be called as a mature phase or whether it should be considered as a juvenile phase. So, the answer to this question is the interflowering period is called as mature because the plant has already started the production of the flower. Clear? So, inter means between. So, between the flowering period, that period is the mature period in the plants. Plants, the annual and biennial types. Now, there are three different categories of plants. One is the annual plant, other is biennial plants, and lastly it is perennial plants. Annual, 1. So, those plants which complete their life cycle, that is from germination to the production of seeds within 1 year and then they die, are called as the annual plants. So, those plants which survive for 1 year, that is their period from the germination to the production of the seed is 1 year and after that they die. Those plants are called as annual plants. The next one is biennial plants. So, those plants which takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. So, those plants which take the 2 years to complete their life cycle are called as the biennial plant. In such plants, during the first year, growth results which results in the formation of the small rosettes of the leaves near the soil surface. Now, biennial plants में क्या होता है? During the first year of growth, normally they produce the small group of leaves. Rosette is group of the leaves near the soil surface. Whereas during the second season's growth, stem elongation, flowering and seed formation occurs followed by the entire plant's death. So, it is during the second year or second season of growth where stem elongation, flowering and seed production takes place. And after that, the entire plant dies. Whereas perennial plants are those plants that persist for many growing seasons. They are the plants which live for more than 2 years. So, when we talk about these categories of plants, then the annual and biennial plants, they show the clear-cut vegetative, reproductive and senescent phases. In the annual and biennial plants, we can clearly distinguish amongst the vegetative, reproductive and senescent phases. But in case of the perennial species, it is very difficult to clearly define these phases because the perennial plants, they live for more than 2 years. So, in this plant, it is very difficult to distinguish amongst the vegetative, reproductive and the senescent phases. Clear, students? Now, there are certain plants which show unusual flowering phenomenon. So, a few plant exhibits unusual flowering phenomenon. Some of them, such as bamboo species, flower once in their lifetime, generally after 50 to 100 years, produce large number of fruits and then die. So there are some species of plants which flower only once in their lifetime, and after flowering they will die. So one such example is bamboo species. Bamboo species, it will flower once in its lifetime, generally after 50 to 100 years. It will produce large number of fruits and finally it will die. Another one is Strobilanthes kunthiana, which is commonly called as Neelakaranji. It flowers once in 12 years. So, Strobilanthes kunthiana, which is commonly called as Neelakaranji, it will flower once in 12 years. This flower or this plant flowered during September-October 2006. It has its mass flowering transformed large tracts of hilly areas of Kerala, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu into the blue stretches and attracted a large number of tourists. See students, this is a hilly area of Munnar. Here these all blue colored plants are nothing but they are Neelkuranji. So their flowering is so fast, or you can say mass flowering process takes place in them, and due to that the hilly areas of this region got converted into blue stretches which attracted many tourists. Clear? Now when we talk about this juvenile phase, reproductive phase in animal, how can we distinguish it? In animals, the juvenile phase is followed by morphological and physiological changes prior to active reproductive behavior. So, when we talk about the transition from the juvenile phase to the reproductive phase in animals, we will see certain morphological and physiological changes. Consider yourself. From the period of growth to puberty, many of the changes have taken place in your body. Hormonal secretion, sexual hormone secretion की वजह से there are certain changes in the secondary sexual characters. Secondary sexual characters are formed. So, from juvenile phase to morphological to the reproductive phase, from puberty to the actual reproductive phase, many morphological and physiological changes occur. Say for example, in human beings, we see the development of the hairs in the different region of the body. In the females, there will be the development of the mammary glands. The development of the muscles occurs in the males. So these are certain changes which occur in the animals from the transition, or you can say when they transit from the juvenile to the reproductive phase. The reproductive phase is also of variable duration in different organisms. Like juvenile phase, the reproductive phase is also different for different kinds of the organisms. Now question arises, among animals, for example birds, do they lay egg all through the year or it is a seasonal phenomenon? Question arises whether the birds lay the egg throughout the year or whether it is a seasonal process. Same question arises about other animals, like what about frogs and lizard? So the answer to this question is birds living in nature lay the eggs only seasonally. So birds will lay the eggs seasonally. That is the important thing. However, the birds in captivity, like as in the poultry farms में birds का जो main reason है वो क्यों है? Egg production है. So in such cases they can be made to lay egg throughout the year, but these eggs cannot be hatched to form the young ones. So birds which are kept in captivity, they can be made to lay the egg throughout the year, but these eggs won't hatch to form the young ones. Are you getting my point? So normally the birds, they will lay the eggs seasonally. In this case, egg laying is not related to reproduction. but it is a commercial exploitation for human welfare. So birds which are kept in captivity are made to lay the egg throughout the year. In such case, this egg laying process is not related to the process of reproduction, but it is the commercial exploitation for the human welfare. Now, the females of placental mammals, those mammals which exhibits the placenta. So, the females of placental mammals exhibit the cyclical changes in the activities of ovaries and accessory ducts as well as the hormones during the reproductive phase. Now, the females of the placental mammals, those mammals which bears the placenta, such females undergo cyclic changes in the ovary, in the accessory duct as well as in the hormone during the reproductive phase. During the reproductive phase, the mammals the females of the placental mammals undergo the cyclic changes in the ovaries, in the accessory ducts as well as in the hormone secretions. So, what are such changes called as? What are these cyclic changes called as? So, in non-primate animals like cows, sheep, rats, deers, dogs, tigers, etc. Very important, which are primates along with their example, which are non-primates, their examples, and what type of cycles do they exhibit is very, very, very important, students. So, in non-primate animals like cow, sheep, rat, deer, dog, tiger, etc., such cyclical changes during the reproduction are called estrous cycle. So, cyclic changes occurring during the reproductive phase in the non-primate mammals is called as estrous cycle, whereas in primates like monkeys, apes and human beings, it is called as menstrual cycle. So, cyclic changes during the reproductive phase in the placental mammals of the primates is called as the menstrual cycle. So, these cyclical changes are categorized into two groups. One is estrous cycle, which occur in the non-primate mammals, and another one is the menstrual cycle, which occurs in the primates. In the next slide, we will see what are the difference between the menstrual and estrous cycle. But before that, many mammals, especially those living in natural wild conditions, exhibit such cycles only during the favorable seasons in their reproductive phase and are called as the seasonal breeders. Now, there are two categories further. One is the seasonal breeder and another one is the continuous breeders. Who can be considered as the seasonal breeders? So, many mammals which live in wild condition, they undergo such cyclic changes in the favorable season in their reproductive phase. पर्टिकुलर सीजन में ही ये साइक्लिक चेंजेस दिखते हैं ड्यूरिंग द रिप्रोडक्टिव फेज. Such organisms are called as seasonal breeders. That is, they undergo the process of reproduction in the particular season only. Whereas many other animals are reproductively active throughout their reproductive phase. Whereas most of the animals, most of the mammals, they are reproductively active throughout their reproductive phase. ऐसा नहीं है कि such cyclical changes or they are capable of reproducing only during the particular season. Most of the mammals में क्या होता है, they are reproductively active throughout their complete reproductive phase, and such organisms are called as continuous breeders. What are they called as? They are called as the continuous breeders. Clear, students? So, cyclic changes occur in the ovaries, in the ducts, as well as in the hormone secretions in the reproductive phase of the females. These cyclic changes are of two types. In non-primates, it is estrous cycle, and in primates, it is the menstrual cycle. Now, there are organisms which are basically undergo this cycle only during the particular favorable season. Such organisms are called seasonal breeders, whereas most of the mammals are reproductively active throughout their complete reproductive phase, and such mammals are called as the continuous breeders. Now see students, here you can see some of the differences between the estrous cycle and the menstrual cycle. First difference is the estrous cycle occurs in non-primates, whereas menstrual cycle it occurs in primates. The second phase is called as the estrous phase, or also it is called as the heat period. So estrous cycle mein there is only one state, that is called as the estrous phase, and this estrous phase is very short. It lasts for only 12 to 24 hours in case of the cows. Whereas when we talk about menstrual cycle, we know that this menstrual cycle comprises of three phases. One is menstrual phase, another one is proliferative phase, and another one is secretory phase. And this cycle it lasts for, one menstrual cycle approximately lasts for 28 to 30 days. So estrous cycle mein estrous phase is very short, which lasts for only 12 to 24 hours, whereas menstrual cycle is divided into three phases like menstrual, proliferative and secretory phase. In the estrous cycle, there does not occur the blood flow. So estrous cycle does not involve blood flow, but we know that blood flows in the last few days of the menstrual cycle, whereas in the menstrual cycle there will be the blood flow. Endometrium which is broken is reabsorbed. In estrous cycle also there will be the breakdown of the endometrium, but that broken endometrium will be reabsorbed. Whereas in the menstrual cycle, the broken endometrium sheds during the menstruation. There will be the shedding, that endometrial layer which is broken, it sheds off. Okay. Copulation urge increases only during the estrous period. Very important. In estrous cycle, estrous period के time पे ही copulation desire, sexual desire increases. But in the menstrual cycle, copulation basically is not permitted by the females during the menstrual phase. Normally, the females do not permit the copulation during the menstrual phase. So these are some of the differences between the estrous and menstrual cycle. Now, that was regarding the reproductive phase, right? Now, the next phase is the senescent phase. The end of the reproductive phase can be considered as one of the parameters of senescence or old age. Senescence is aging. So, one of the reason for aging, one of the factor for aging is the end of the reproductive phase. So, end of the reproductive phase can be considered as the beginning of the senescent phase. There are concomitant. Concomitant means associated, related, linked. There are concomitant changes in the body like slowing of the metabolism during this last phase of the lifespan. So, we will see certain related changes. Reproductive phase end हुआ है, senescent phase start हुआ है. So, how can we say that senescent phases have started? So, certain changes occurs in the body, that is the metabolic processes slows down and many such processes. Old age ultimately leads to death. In both plants and animals, hormones are responsible for transition between three phases. Which are the three phases? Juvenile, reproductive and senescence. So, very important thing to be kept in mind. So, transition, that is juvenile से जो reproductive phase में हम enter होते हैं, who is responsible for that? Hormones. And again, from reproductive phase we enter into the senescence phase, and for that also the hormones are responsible. So, hormones are mainly responsible for the transitions between the three phases. Interactions between the hormones and certain environmental factors regulate the reproductive phases and the associated behavioral expressions of the organisms. Now, let us study what are the various events which occur in the sexual reproduction. What are the processes occurring during the process of sexual reproduction? After attainment of maturity, all sexually reproducing organisms exhibits events and processes that have remarkable fundamental similarity, even though the structures associated with the sexual reproductions are indeed very different. So, all the organisms after attaining the sexual maturity, they are capable of reproducing by sexual reproduction. Now, the processes through which the organisms reproduce through sexual reproduction are similar in all the organisms, though the structures which are involved are different. So, the process is same for all the organisms, but to carry out that processes, the structures involved will be different in different kinds of the organisms. The events of sexual reproduction, though elaborate and complex, follow a regular sequence. Now, the process of sexual reproduction is very complex, but it follows a particular pattern. Sexual reproduction is characterized by fusion or fertilization of male and female gamete, formation of zygote and embryogenesis. So, these are the certain things or characteristics of the sexual reproduction. Fusion of the gametes resulting in the formation of zygote and zygote forming the embryo, that is embryogenesis. So, we can divide the complete process of the sexual reproduction into three phases. The first is the pre-fertilization events, second is the fertilization event, or you can say the fertilization process, and the third one is post-fertilization event. First is pre-fertilization, pre yani before. Before what? Before fertilization. So, all the events prior to the fertilization are called as the pre-fertilization events. The second one is fertilization, that is the fusion of the gametes. And the last one is the events which occur after the process of fertilization are called as the post-fertilization events. Now, pre-fertilization events can be further categorized into two categories, gametogenesis and gamete transfer. When the term genesis occur, it means formation. So, what is gametogenesis? It is formation of the gametes. The next one is gamete transfer. That is, whatever gametes are formed, they needs to be transferred so that their fusion can take place. So, that is gamete transfer. Fertilization events, that is the fusion of male and female gametes. Gametogenesis हुआ, उनका ट्रांसफर हुआ, ट्रांसफर होने के बाद the gametes will fuse. So, that is called as the fertilization. And lastly, the post-fertilization, that is after the process of fertilization. So, it involves zygote formation and embryogenesis. Fusion of the gametes lead to the formation of zygote, and zygote will later form the embryo. So, that is embryogenesis. So, these are the complete, this chart shows the complete stages occurring in the process of the sexual reproduction. So, let us begin with the pre-fertilization events. So, it is the first phase. It includes all the events of the sexual reproduction prior to fusion of gametes. So, all those processes occurring in the stage of the sexual reproduction before the fusion of the gametes are called as pre-fertilization. The two main pre-fertilization events are gametogenesis, formation of gamete, and another one is the gamete transfer. So, first of all, gametogenesis. So, gametogenesis, what is gametogenesis? Gametogenesis is the formation of the gametes. What is gametogenesis? It is the formation of the gametes. So, gametogenesis refers to the process of formation of two types of gametes. One is the male gamete and another one is female gametes. When we talk about the number of chromosomes, which type of cells are gamete? They are haploid. They contain the n number of chromosomes. Now, there are two types of gametes. One is homogametes and another one is heterogametes. Homo, same. Homogametes are also called isogametes. Iso again means the same. So the two gametes are so similar in appearance that it is not possible to categorize them into the male and female gametes. So two morphologically similar gametes are called as the homogametes. The two gametes are so much similar in their appearance that it is very difficult to say which one is the male gamete, which one is the female gamete. Such gametes are called as homogametes. Example, they are found in algae. The next one is heterogametes. Hetero, that is different, so or distinct. So two morphologically distinct gametes are called as heterogametes. Two morphologically distinct types of gametes. So basically most of the sexually reproducing organisms, they produce the heterogametes. These heterogametes are of two types: male gamete, which is called as ANTHEROZOID or sperm, and female gamete, which is called as egg or ovum. So students, we can conclude that there are two types of gamete, isogamete or homogamete, which are two morphologically or similar type of gametes; heterogametes, which are two morphologically distinct types of the gametes. These heterogametes are of two types: male gamete, which is called sperm or ANTHEROZOID; female gamete, which is called as the egg or ovum. Now, these are the diagrams. See, these are the two gametes which are morphologically distinct. Here we cannot say which one is male, which one is female. So, these are called as homogametes or isogametes. They are found in Cladophora, which is an algae. Now, see students, these are another type of gametes which are heterogamete. Hetero means different. See, morphologically both these gametes are different. One is very big, one is very small. One is flagellated, one is without flagella. So these are homogametes of the fucus, which is again one type of the algae. And these are the heterogametes of Homo sapiens, which are human beings. So these are the heterogametes of human beings. See students, this one is the female gamete and this is the male gamete, which is the sperm. Both of them are morphologically distinct. Clear? So these are the various kind of the gametes. Now, sexuality in organisms. Which type of sexes can be present in the organisms? Sexual reproduction in the organisms generally involves fusion of the gametes from two different individuals. So basically sexual reproduction involves fusion of the gametes, and normally these gametes are formed by the two different individuals of the opposite sex. But it is not always true. There are cases where self-fertilization is observed. In most of the cases, the gamete formation occurs by the different individuals of different sexes. But it is not always true. In some cases, gamete formation, both male and female gamete, will be produced by only one individual, and in them self-fertilization may be observed. That is, the egg will fuse with the sperm of the same organisms, right, formed in the same body. So self-fertilization is observed. Plants may have both male and female reproductive structure in the same plant. Now, or they may be present on different plants, that is unisexual. So in case of plants, the male and female reproductive structures may be present on same plant. If they are present on same plant, that plant is bisexual, or they may be present on different plants. Male reproductive structure is present on one plant and the female reproductive structure is present on other plant. So such plants are called as the unisexual plant. See, this is a monoecious plant. Mono means one, that is male and female reproductive structure are present within the same organism. We will see it more clearly in the next slide. Then another one is dioecious. Di means two. So these are two different individual. Male, this is a male female part and this is the male part, and they are present on the different individual. And this is a bisexual flower. That is, the male reproductive part and the female reproductive part is present within the single flower. Example is the sweet potato. Now we know that all the plants are not flowering plants. right? So in the non-flowering plants, what is the condition? What is the condition in the flowering plants? Let us see that. In several fungi and plants, the term homothallic, homo means same, and monoecious are used to denote bisexual condition. Homothallus, thallus is the simple body, okay. The plant body of the lower plants are called as thallus, which is not differentiated into root stems or leaves, okay. So homo means same and mono means one. So within that same individual, within the one individual, both male and female reproductive structures are present. So to explain the term bisexual in fungi and plants and several fungi and plants, which terminology is used? Homothallus and monoecious. Whereas the term hetero means different thallus, or dioecious, di means two different individuals. They are used to describe unisexual. Unisexual means male and female reproductive organs or structures or gametes are produced by different individuals. So for them, which terminology is used? Heterothallus or dioecious. Whereas when we talk about the flowering plants, the unisexual male flower is called, flowers may be unisexual or bisexual. Bisexual flowers are those flowers which will have both the male and the female reproductive parts. Whereas unisexual flowers will have those unisexual flowers which are having the stamens are called as male flower, that is they are staminate flower, while the female flower is called as pistillate flower or it bears the pistils. Now, in these cases, the flowering plants, unisexual flowers में दो condition possible है. If both male and female flowers are present on the same individual, it is called as monoecious, whereas if they are present on the separate individual, it is called as dioecious. So flowering plants में dioecious monoecious condition को हम bisexual condition नहीं बोल रहे, हम क्या बोल रहे हैं कि flowers are unisexual only, that is male flower is different, female flower is different, but these flowers are present on the same plant, then they are called as monoecious. And if the male and female flowers are present on the different plants, then that condition is called as dioecious. Some examples of monoecious plants are cucurbits and coconut, and of dioecious plant it is papaya and date palm. The male gametes are formed in staminate flower, whereas the egg is formed in the pistillate flower. Now what about animals? So students, we also know that animals, they also may be unisexual and bisexual. Earthworm, sponge, tapeworm, leech, they are bisexual animals that possess both male and female reproductive organs and are also called as hermaphrodites. So those in animals, the bisexual animals are called as hermaphrodites. That is, they bear the male and female reproductive organs in the same individual. Whereas cockroach is an example of unisexual species. See students, this is earthworm. Earthworm में testis भी है, ovary भी है. So it is which type of organism? Bisexual. Whereas this is a cockroach where the male cockroach is different, female cockroach is different, and so the male and female reproductive organs are present in the different individual. So that is regarding the sexuality in organisms. Now how gamete formation takes place, that we will be studying in the next lecture. I end my lecture here. Thank you students.